Hello, welcome to Tips, Tools, and Techniques. This is Mary-Jeanine coming to you live, possibly live, or if you're watching me later, not live, from the sewing studio in Maitland, Florida. And I have got lots of great content to talk about this afternoon. So I've got a couple announcements. I love questions, and I love when you post where you're from. So give me that for all this free content. Let me know where you're coming from. Let's see, a couple quick announcements. We have a shop hop going on. So if you've never done a shop hop, what that means is if you hit all 6 stores on the passport. Stephen, can we do a close-up on this camera here? My husband is doing tech today. Here we go. So, well, it's a little, here we go. So those are your 6 different, he's going to zoom in for us. Other way. There we go. Oh, look at you. Okay, so we've got Quilting Palette in Lady Lake, Nana's Quilt Shop in Brooksville, So Many Things and Pieces, piece by piece in Mount Dora. Then we've got the Sewing Studio in Lady Lake and the Sewing Studio in Maitland where I'm standing. So, okay, you can hit the regular button now. So what a shop hop means is if you hit all 6 stores and you get your free little jelly roll strip. There's 6 different strips, lights, mediums, and darks. And I believe we have a pattern. Don't quote me on it. Anyway, the passport is, well, it was $8 or $10. I think it's a little bit more, $10 during the shop hop. It started yesterday, so now we're in the middle of the shop hop. Anyway, if you get all 6 stamps, then you are eligible for either a $70 gift card, $75 gift card, one pulled at each shop, and the second place is $50 gift card for a shopping spree. So anyway, that ends on December 6th. I think usually it goes over 2 weekends. So that's a shop hop. You doing okay? And then I've got 3 classes coming up soon that are almost full. Everything else is full, so I'm not even going to talk about it. The jelly roll class, jelly roll rug class. I have 2 openings left on Tuesday, December 16th in the morning. I have an evening binding class. I don't do binding in the evening, but once every year or 2. So if you work during the day and you need to learn how to bind a quilt, this Tuesday night. And then finally, my Finish It Up class, which oftentimes doesn't fill, but it's filling up at the end of this month. Sorry, end of December. So Finish It Up means any project that I have started you on and you need a little more help getting going, come to my Finish It Up class. Something else I wanted to say. Oh, sometimes people bring their quilt tops and I help them baste it to their batting and backing. So that might be an option. So those are all my announcements. I love questions, so please post your questions and I will answer them if I possibly can. I love questions. Also, if you have not printed out your handout, we're going to post a link to the handout. You can either bring it up on a separate device, or you can print it out. I'm going to talk about a couple of quilts here before I get to the handout, so you have some time, so don't kill yourself trying to get to the handout, but eventually we'll get there. And then also my favorites page will also post that link as well. So the things that I'm going to be talking about, if you don't have one and you'd like to purchase it, we have a favorites page. You can find it on the favorites page. And then also 15% discount on everything that you purchase today. Newport Richey. Is it Port Richey or Newport Richey? Welcome. Thank you for coming. Anyway, Port Richey. I don't think I knew about Port Richey. I've always been to Newport Richey. Anyway, discount is we're going to put that up in just a second. You're 15% off. Use TTT15 in your coupon code or discount code, and that is good till tomorrow, Sunday night at midnight. So that's all the housekeeping. We're ready to do the fun stuff. Are you ready? I am so excited about this quilt here today. This is a stack and whack quilt. You might have heard that that term before. It's been around at least 50 years. I remember when Stack and Whack first came out. If you want it, you can stop and pan it with that camera if you want. He's done this once before, and we're kind of learning together. Gabriella had someplace she had to be up at the front of the store today. So all of these stars are made with one cut of fabric, and let's use the regular shot here. I want to show you the one fabric, not that quilt. This fabric here, it's a Kaif facet fabric, and I used that to make all these different stars. That is, to me, what's so exciting about Stack and Whack. You get all these looks, and my favorite question is, how many different fabrics did you use to make this quilt? And I just say just one plus the background. That is thrilling to me. Bethany Reynolds wrote the book, and it was such a popular book. I think this is the 29th, well, not my copy, but right now we're selling the 29th printing of this book. It came out when Amazon first came out, and 1 week it was so popular on Amazon. It was the #1 selling book on Amazon that particular week. That's how long ago it was. It probably would never happen now, but it's a very popular technique. I asked this morning for a show of hands, how many have heard of Stack and Whack? And most people raised their hand, and only like 3 people had made it. I made a quilt about a year ago called Vivid Kaleidoscope. It was a black background. You may remember it. And it was basically a Stack and Whack technique, even though the instructions never mentioned it. And so many people took the class. They're like, this is so much fun. I'm like, it's time to teach Stack and Whack again. And here I am. So I'm actually going to teach this class next quarter. So if you are local and you would like to take it, I want to say it's 3 Monday mornings in January, but I have to pull it up on my phone. And we don't know 100% because Melinda's doing the schedule, and sometimes she has to move things around. So I don't quote me on it yet, but as soon as I know the schedule, I will email it out. If you're not getting emails from me, I would encourage you to send me an email. My email's at the bottom of every handout, as is my website that lists every quilting event happening in Florida. I don't say this very often, but this is just a personal thing that I've been doing. Florida Quilt Network, I've been doing it since January of '99. Where I put all the quilting information happening in Florida, and I put it in one place. So I send out a newsletter once a month with all the latest stuff happening in the state of Florida. So it's a good thing. Doesn't cost you anything. I don't share email addresses. Okay, back to Stack and Whack. So all these different stars were made with a single piece of fabric. I'm going to demonstrate how that's made. You can also take the class. I also want to show you another Stack and Whack. This is actually, the label says number 14. I have made 13 other Stack and Whacks, not all like this. She has 3 or 4 at least different books out there, and this is actually the quilt from the cover. But some of her Stack and Whacks have like 3 or 4 pieces per block, and this one has 8. And this one is actually the same pattern, but it's slightly different. But it's amazing to me that just a simple black and white black and white fabric can make such different blocks. And so the fabric is used. I put the fabric in the border so you can see what the fabric looked like. And it's amazing that you come up with all these different stars. So I'm just in love with Stack and Whack, and I hope that you can take the class or at least buy the book and make one for yourself because they're amazing. You doing okay? So let's do this. We're going to do the overhead. And when, let's go back to the other one again. Let's just talk for one more minute. The whole idea behind Stack and Whack is that you are stacking up for this particular 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you're getting 8 repeats of a fabric. So fabric these days is mostly the repeat is usually between 22 and 24 inches. When I first started doing Stack and Whack, sometimes they'd be 10-inch repeats. These are all the same. And then the fabric repeats again. And you can also look at the selvage sometimes and figure out where your repeat is. But it used to be all different size repeats, and now mostly they're between 20 and 22 inches. So I find out, okay, I need a 22-inch repeat. So 22 times 8, that's how much fabric I'm going to need, 22 inches times 8. So it worked out to like 5.5 yards or something, whatever it was. Seems like a lot, but you can also put it on the back. And I have a little bit left. I didn't use all of it up. I could have. So then once you got your repeat, according to this particular pattern, I'm going to cut a big piece for about 14 inches by whatever the repeat is. Let's say 22. So I'm going to have a 14 by 22 piece of fabric, and I'm going to cut 8 of those, and they're going to be exactly the same. So now we're going to do the overhead. And if you'll see, notice here, I've got 8 pieces of fabric that are all exactly the same. And this, in fact, is the leftover piece from my 14 by 22 inch piece. So I got 8 of those. You really can't do this quilt without some flathead pins. So those are on my favorites page. But I take this pin and I find some place that is very pointy, that I can find a place to put my point. And I'm going to put my glasses on just to be sure I do this right. So let's say I'm just going to use the point of this little green stem here. So I'm going to find that with my non-existent fingernails 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Whoop, I picked up too many. 5, 6, 7, and they're all over. So you think you could just go down, but you can't. You have to do each one separately. There it is. There's 8. All right, so kind of straighten it out. Now, I've already got a pin there and a pin here, but one thing I wanted to show you, and there's a lot of this is in the book, but some of this is my own stuff. I've got a pin that's going down. You can see it's going through all 8 layers, right? And you can't just take that pin and pin it like that, because what you've done is you've just pushed all your fabrics off a little bit. So I keep that pin going straight up and down, and then I take a second pin and I kind of take a really shallow bite through all 8 layers. Probably best to do it on the table here. So this pin is straight up and down, and I'm going to take a shallow bite through all 8. So it's more of a diagonal going in and coming back out slowly, like a plane landing. And that way all those fabrics stay, because you want perfectly right on top of each other. Stefan, let's use this camera here to look at, I'm trying to find a good center here. See if we can find this one here. So you see how the centerpiece, you know, it may not be perfect, but it's pretty close. But that's what you're looking for. You're looking for something, and they're all exactly the same. Okay, let's go back to the overhead. Thank you. So that, like I said, that's my leftover pieces. So I had a bunch. So for this particular pattern, you're cutting 6.25 inch, 6.25 inch squares, and then you're cutting them in half this way. But here's the magic. Here's what I really want to show you. So here, I'm going to call this the center, maybe. Let's see what happens. So this magic is just, and I need to back up at some point and tell you about starching, but we will. But I love to get to this point, so I get ahead of myself because this is so much fun. So you begin to see this beautiful kaleidoscope made with one stack of fabrics. Oops, I got to bring all this down here so the camera can see it all. Sorry about that. I wasn't paying attention. There we go. All right, so that's pretty cool. And you know what? I'm going to take a picture of this, and I'm going to say, okay, do I like that? Or I can take the exact same pieces and flip them over so the geese are pointed in the other direction, and I could decide whether I like that better. So I take a picture of both, and this is a design tip that you may have heard about before, maybe not. But take a picture of your ideas, and then it's much easier to use the camera to swipe back and forth. So we got a lot of movement going here, but got these little guys are pretty interesting too. Know that your 1/4 inch, you're going to lose 1/4 of an inch all around. So some of the stuff on the very edge you may or may not get, but it's all good. So anyway, I took a picture of both. Let's say I like this one the best. So when I put these back together, I'm going to put a pin here. Let's look at the full quilt, Stefan. So I cut as many pieces as I could, and I had, I think, 12 packets. I only needed 8 packets, right? So I tested each one. I put a pin in the center of the ones I liked. Fortunately, I had 8 of the same ones going. You notice how the geese are all going this way? Well, you could make some go the other way and no one would ever know. So this one is a block going the opposite direction. So these are all going clockwise, and this one is going counterclockwise, and you don't even really notice. You could notice, but your negative space is going to be a little different. But it really doesn't, to me, it doesn't matter. In fact, we're going to go back to this quilt. This has them going in both directions, and I asked today if it bothered anybody that they were going in 2 directions, and they said, no, we love it. So here it is. You may be able to see some of the blocks going clockwise and some of them going counterclockwise. So just a little, if you look at the negative space, you can kind of see it, see the differences, but it shouldn't matter because they're all beautiful. So just, and that's definitely not something that Bethany talks about in the book, but sometimes you can get them going both directions. So I have these leftover pieces that maybe I'll use for some English paper piecing, cut them into hexagons or something, and I'll get fussy cut hexagons. A nice thing to use up with your leftover pieces. So to make this block, you not only, of course, need your main fabric, but then you also need a background triangle and this background piece. And another nice thing about the way she's constructed these blocks is that there's no Y seams. So I'm going to sew these 2 pieces together, and I'm going to sew these 2 pieces. Let's do an overhead. It might be easier to see than on my chest. So we're going to sew these 2 together and these 2 together, and then we sew this piece here. So then you end up with 4 squares that you sew together. Let me show you the back, because this is one of the few times that I press open my seams. I'm a lazy quilter. If I can figure out but in this case, you do want to, because you have all these points coming to the center. So you definitely want to open your seams. Another thing, sometimes, no matter how good we are, you get a little mountain in the center. It's just what happens. Stefan, let's go back to the comments just in case. Yeah, you get a little mountain in the center, and I'm here to help you solve that problem. And I also need to back up to say this product is the bomb. Magic sizing. You used to be able to get it at the grocery store and Walmart. You can no longer find it anywhere but Amazon for $11. We just found some, and we're selling it for $4.32 minus your 15% discount. So but to be honest, I don't know if we can mail this. Content's under pressure. I don't know if we can put it in the mail. We'll have to find out. Anyway, find it. Like I said, it is available, but it's not cheap anymore, except from us. But I have relearned starch, or excuse me, size. This is sizing. It's not starch. I used some starch on some of this, and it just wasn't working the way I wanted to. So fortunately, I had an old bottle of sizing, and I used it, and I liked it a lot better, which is why I asked them to carry it here in the store. So I recently have rediscovered how nice it is to work with starched fabric. Everything comes out perfectly. You're going to see in the next quilt, perfect points. Everything was great. And so what I did is I sprayed my yardage, not so much that it's sopping wet, but just a good amount. Walk away for 5 minutes, come back and press it. You're not pushing, you're not scrubbing, you're just gentle pressing with your iron, leaving for 5 minutes so it will cool completely, and then moving the yardage and doing it all again. So spray, walk away, press, walk away, back and forth. So it takes a little while. So I'm at my sewing table, machine, doing some sewing in between, whatever. But that really helps. And you pretty much have to use some kind of starch or sizing for these blocks because you're going through 8 layers at the same time with your rotary cutter, and you want those fabrics to be good, to behave themselves. And the best way to make them behave themselves is with the sizing or the starch. I like the sizing better. Let's see. what did I want to say? So sizing, cutting your fabrics. I also pressed and starched the green background fabrics. And by the way, what was I going to say about that? I forgot. I will say, I forgot to say this morning, that when I make my stars, I actually didn't come in to purchase my green fabric until I made enough stars to bring them in an audition. So I brought in a bunch of piles that look like this. And I pulled out some bolts at the store and laid these out in a star, just different colored ones, just to pick out I probably auditioned 5 or 6 different backings. So don't worry about your background fabric. And in class, we're not going to worry about the background fabric until we've cut out some stars. So we get to have fun right away. So many things I wanted to mention. The background is grunge, which I think works well. I'll talk a little bit about the quilting. We can do a close-up on this with this camera here. So I started out by quilting on the green, and I used just a loosey-goosey leaf pattern, just as free motion, just with my hands and my eyes. I don't have a computerized long arm. So those are leaves. You'll see that exact same motif in the next quilt. I guess I'm in a leaf mode right now. And then we're going to wander over here. It's kind of hard to see, but I just did a very loosey-goosey ribbony thing just to nail down my seams and the centers of these triangles. But I did it in a navy blue, so it wouldn't really show. And I might be able to, no, I see the quilting on the back, maybe. Not really. Well, you have to come in and see the quilt in person, but I'm just, about twice a year, I make a quilt that I'm just so excited about. Luminary was the beginning of the year. This is the end of the year. I love Stack and Wax, so I hope the classes will go, because I love to see what other people, and then people ask me about fabric, what kind of fabric to do. So I'm going to pull this up again to show this K-facet. This is a K-facet Caladium print. And I like to have maybe a few straightish lines here and then some curves. The biggest thing for me is you don't want fabric that has a lot of background, just plain background, because then half of your stars are going to have nothing on them. So I like a very busy print, kind of a medium to large print. And I'm going to cross over here, show this black and white one more time. Again, it was a very simple stripe, but it had some nice graphic straight lines, plus some round pieces and no background. And I think that's what makes it successful. So if you were to take the class, we will have time to go into the store and look at some different fabrics and pick something out. So that'll be part of the class, is helping you to pick out fabrics. And maybe you found something in your stash. You need a lot of yardage though, so you may not have anything in your stash. If you've got questions, let me know. I've got to pick up my glasses that I just dropped. I think that's, I keep thinking of more stuff. The book comes without a comb binding. Let's do an overhead. And I really like putting comb bindings on the books that I use a lot, because when I open up the page, I want to, I made that quilt for your sister, actually. It's on her bed. When I open up the book, I want to be able to lay it flat. This is page, what page is this? 33, and this is probably the page I have it open to the most, but you see where you sew four pieces to a triangle, 4 pieces to this straight piece, and then you make a square that looks like this, and then you sew 4 of those together, and you end up with that. So I live on this page mostly, so it's nice to be able to keep it flat. I also underline for myself how to press the seams open or closed, and that helps when I'm quickly perusing what do I need to do with each seam. So magic Stack and Whack, it never gets old, I'm promising you. Any questions, please let me know. You know I love my questions. I better put all these pins back or bad things will happen. Yep, hi from the villages. Hello, Dawn, good to see you. All righty, let's do a regular shot here, Stefan. And I'm going to pull this quilt down. There's no questions. This coming up quilt, about 3 weeks ago, Gabriella sent me a picture and said, would you like to make this quilt? We've got a lot of kits and we need to sell some kits. So I said, sure. And I had no idea how much I was going to love it after a little picture on my phone. Love the colors. It's very modern. There's a lot going on. And hello, Ronalda. I like that name. Let me get rid of the magic sizing here so you can see the whole beautiful quilt. So we're going to talk a lot today about half square triangles, a little bit about flying geese, which is really this whole quilt is either squares, flying geese, or half square triangles. Again, I use my magic sizing on all the fabrics, and I'm really thrilled with how sharp everything came out. It was just a breeze to sew through. One of the things I did is the kit came with a bunch of fat quarters. So I sprayed each fat quarter from the back and then just, put one down, spray, put another one down, spray, piled them all up, and then flipped them over, put one down and pressed it, put the next one down and pressed it. Thank you, Brenda. I should have said that. Staples and Office Depot will do comb binding for you. I forgot to say that's where you can get it done. Yeah, you just walk in and say, I want comb binding on this quilt and on this book. And in fact, on this particular book, I had some extra pages. Like I had sent Bethany emails and asked for questions and stuff. So I included the page right there in the book. And then I have another one back here. So it's kind of handy to have your own, your extra pieces. They've kind of fallen out. I've used this quilt. This is her errata, some changes that she had made on her website. And that's one of the reasons why there's so much. I think there's like 29 printings. I think this is one of the early ones. I got this book a long time ago. I don't even see which printing it was, but I looked at the books that we're selling right now, and we're on the 29th printing of this book. That's how popular it is. So now you know what a stack and whack quilt is. Somebody asked today, what's the difference between stack and whack and stack and slash? Big difference. Stack and slash is you stack up 4, 5, 6 squares, rectangles, and then just free hands put use your ruler, but just anywhere, cut a line, and then shuffle your two sides and sew them back together. And you do that multiple times and you have a crazy quilt. You didn't really plan where the cuts were going to be. This is very, very planned, very measured, very precise. Hence the starch, hence the flat pins. And I didn't talk really why we needed these flat pins, but if you've pinned all your fabric, your 14 by 25 hunk of 8 layers of fabric, and you want to cut, if you have a regular pin there, it's got a big round head, and your ruler is gonna be a mess. But these flat-headed pins, once you get it in there nice and tight, the ruler sits on top of it, and your ruler is not going to wobble. Hence, you got to have these pins to do a stack and whack. And I'm going to just go back. I'm just going to lift this up. You see, I've written a number on there. I made a quilt a while ago. Actually, this quilt, now that I'm thinking about it, each block was different. And so I wrote numbers on these flat-headed pins. And that way I was able to keep all my blocks straight. So I didn't build them necessarily in order. So I'm like, oh, this is block 9. And then I looked at the book and I said, oh, block 9 goes here. And so it was nice to have numbers. And you can buy pins that have numbers and letters on them, but I just use a little Sharpie and just mark my flower pin. So a little tip there. I have to get a drink. I am still recovering from a month ago, and I'm still, yeah. So much to tell you about this. I am going to start with half square triangles. I've mentioned this tool before. The first time I saw this tool was Jenny Doan with Missouri Star, and she was talking about half square triangles, and it was her favorite way to do half square triangles. And so I said, well, I'm going to have to give this a try. So it's Clearly Perfect slotted trimmers. And I have some on my favorites page, so we'll put up that link again. And when you get it, you get 2 different rulers. So you get a total of 11 different sizes of half square triangles. Why do I like this system? Because once I make my, half square triangle, drew a line down the center, sewed on either side. And by the way, you don't need a ruler to cut down the center. You just kind of eyeball it. It doesn't matter what your seam allowance is. Usually you have to open this up and trim all 4 sides. But with this system, you only have to trim 2 sides. And I am Mrs. Efficient. I'm always looking for efficiencies. And that to me is a great efficiency. So I can make, I'm going to lift this up a little bit. I can make 2-inch, which is 1.5 finished. I'm going to go all the way. Actually, I'm doing the wrong one. I want to make a 3.5, 3.5, and there it is, 3-inch finished. Let's see if you can see that. You see this, so 3.5. So I'm going to put my sewing line on their sewing line. So it's very clear. I don't have to go back and look at the instructions every time. I see that dotted line, and that tells me I need to put it onto my dotted line, which is down here. I did it. Actually, I'm going to turn this over so you can see my dotted line even better. And I'm going to put this down. So their dotted line goes on top of my dotted line. And I have very generous margin to cut off. And I forgot to say, so you know how much I like my pop tops, which extend the ruler to just be an extension of my hand. But I don't really want to spend $2 on a pop top for a ruler that I don't use very often. So we've got these suction cup suction cup handles, and they're on my favorites page. So there we go. So now this is an extension of my hand. Back to my dotted line on the sewing line. I make 2 cuts, 1, 2. And by the way, I'm left-handed, so I'm going to have it pointing this way so it's easy to cut. If you're right-handed, you're going to point it the other way. Just a little tip there. It's not something they put in the instructions, but I've just found it's a lot easier. Okay. Oops. And there it is. Okay. Then they call it the slotted trimmer, because you've got these little, well, I'll just show you how it's done. You got these little slots here that allow you to cut off the dog ears. But I'm here to tell you, I think it takes too long to get in there with your rotary cutter. And look, I didn't even do a good job. Didn't get all the way through with that. What I would rather do is just kind of eyeball it. And it's that fast. So I get my dog ears off. And when you open it up, of course, you have a perfect half square triangle that all I have to do is get it open. There we go. So perfect half square triangle with just 2 cuts rather than 4. 2 cuts plus my dog ears, but you would have to cut your dog ears off in any case. Now we're going to talk about a little bit about pressing. Get rid of all that here. So of course you got to press it, and you're going to be very careful. And I've got a dry iron here that I'm just going to pretend without the silicone. Oftentimes I teach a lot at Quilt Guilds. I teach all over the place, and I see what people do is they do this. They push it. And what happens is you get this little, even just slightly, you get a slightly rounded bow right there because this is rounded, right? And you're pushing it, and it's going to be slightly off. So my suggestion then is I like to finger press it. Of course, my seam is going toward the dark. Then I'm finger pressing it to make sure there's no pleats. And then I can come in here with the iron and just hit it up and down. You're pressing, you're not ironing it, okay? Another option, if you don't want to do that for whatever reason, is to come in from one end and press it to the other. So I'm going to approach it like this. Even if it's been closed and you didn't finger press it, you're going to open it up and it's kind of curvy. You can start here and you can hit it and it can go like that. Finally, we let it cool. That's one of my 3 ironing rules is we press the seam as it was sewn. We open it up and we don't press like this, but we press like this or finger press it. My MJ's 3rd rule is I let things cool completely. If it's still a little not as flat as you want, then I like to hit it with a little mist or spray of water, press it again, and immediately hit it with my clapper. I don't know if you have a clapper. It's a piece of hardwood. It's on my favorites page. And a few people raised their hand. Now, I've actually about half the room raised their hand. It's hardwood. I don't know what magic it does, except when you lift this up, it is super flat. And tailors use this a lot for collars and things that you want to be super flat. And so I use it just to flatten my pieces as much as possible. So if you don't have one, that might be a nice thing to ask for Christmas. They're not cheap. This is about $30, give or take, but it is well worth it to have that in your ironing board. And then that's going to be super flat. And let's head back to the big picture here, Stefan. So as you can see, if you come in and look at this in person, like all my points are perfect. And I love that so much. Between the starch and the good ironing practices, it makes it work. What else did I want to tell you about this? Can we get in? Yeah, get a little closer here. So this is one block right here. And I did what I call my MJ's flower, which filled up most of the square. And then I filled in all around each one with that same leaf pattern. I actually quilted this one before I quilted the other one and just kind of came up with this leaf. It's like, I really like this. I'm going to start using it more often. So flowers and leaves, I can get away with it because there's a lot of pink on this quilt and it's probably going to go to a girl. So might as well do flowers. I don't necessarily put flowers on quilts that are going to boys, but maybe I should. But I could certainly put leaves on there, but maybe not flowers. Anyway, I would love to see questions if you got them. I was in the 50% off bin and found this beautiful K facet. Philip Morris. Yes, clappers are wonderful for super flat blocks. If you're familiar with K facet fabrics, which is the first fabric, was one of those caladium leaves was a K print. He took a bunch of old Philip Morris patterns. And I want to say Philip Morris was in the like 1800s. And he took his prints and he recolored them in his crazy Kaif way. And so we have a big line, and this was actually in the 50% off bin. So it kind of went pretty well with that. So if you're into Kaif, you've probably heard of the Philip Morris prints that are so awesome. And I think that is everything. The binding is scrappy because I was too lazy to come back to the store and find a big yard of one of these prints. So I just cut up a bunch of the leftovers and put them on the binding. So let me know if you have any questions about that as I clean up and talk about the next quilt. What? My water bottle? Oh, move it or you want it? Oh. All right, I had to get a drink. All right, and moving on. So hopefully you have your handout. We're going to put a link up one more time with my handout. And you can either, like I said, bring it up on a separate device, or you can put it in the or print it. Either way, because we're gonna take care of that too. We're gonna get the pattern for this quilt. Oh, thank you for asking. I forgot to say we have some kits left. Let's do it. Let's do this camera stuff or the overhead. Let's do the overhead. So this is it's called Petals and Stitches. It's $150.49 minus your 15% discount, and it has all the fabrics you need for the quilt top. Big hunk of background. There was some left over, which is nice because I love this for my neutral pile. So yeah, everything you need. And if you want to make a scrappy binding, the binding too, you just need backing and batting for this quilt. So yes, that, and then it's actually a free pattern. So if you just wanted the pattern, do a search on Petals and Stitches by Stephanie Organis. I don't know. I want to say she's Mexican because I think I've seen her work, and she came from Mexico, and she does beautiful work. But I think these are her fabrics, and so she designed the quilt. So that's where you can buy the pattern. You don't buy the pattern. The pattern's free. Also comes in the kit if you buy the kit. So, and everyone I show this kit to loves these fabrics. They are amazing. And I have a few left to do something fun with. I have to figure out what I'm going to do. Any other good questions? If not, we're going to take this quilt down. If you've been with me for a while, I've been doing this March of 2020. So I've been doing this for a while. I might have showed this quilt behind me before. I call this Piccadilly Circus. And I just talked about it in Vero Beach a week and a half ago. So if you're from Vero Beach, hello. Thank you for joining me at Tips, Tools, and Techniques. But we're going to talk about the first handout, the first page. And mostly what I wanted to talk about was these economy blocks. So this is a very simple economy. Well, let me find a good contrasty one. There's an economy block, or it's also called a square and a square. Okay. And you could actually just leave it the way it is because I've got a second quilt. Yes, I always do, especially the blocks that I really, really like. So this is a square in a square in a square. So here's my square, red with the light blue, and then red again. And you don't have to match that, but you can. This is, if you look closely enough, you realize this is for my thrifted shirt pile that's always too big, and I'm always looking for ways to use up my thrifted cotton men's stripes and plaids and reds, whites, and blues. So same idea. I made this quilt the same way I made the one behind me. So I'm going to talk about this technique. This is a technique that I learned, I believe, at the very first Quilt Guild meeting up in Sanford that I ever went to back in the late 1980s. And I always thought, wow, that is such a good idea. It was a national teacher. She came in and she said this. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I'm going to share this at some point. So here we are. I get to share it with you. Before we do the overhead, what we're going to do is look at what we need for one block. Is, of course, these are bigger squares, but it's the same idea. Is you need a square for the center, and then whatever the background is going to be, I need two squares the same size. So let's do an overhead. So here it is. Here's my center block, and then here's my two squares of the same size. All right. I'm going to cut these two background squares in half on the diagonal. So here they are. So often when you buy a pattern that has an economy block, they'll tell you what size for square, and then they'll give you this weird, crazy number for these 4 triangles. They're always 3 3/8 or something. I mean, just really obnoxious. And the idea here is that you don't need to cut anything obnoxious. You can cut them the same size and cut them in half. So here it is. We're going to sew them together. Yes, there is a little bit of extra around the edges, but you will be glad, because if you were to cut them exactly right, you know, sometimes that bias isn't right, or sometimes you don't have quite enough fabric. So it's always nice to make oversize the block and then trim it down to size, which is what we're doing here. So the point here is that no matter what size block you make, this idea always works. So here's a very large block, here's a medium block, and here's a small block. And that always, always works. That formula of cutting your background squares the same size as your center square. And now let's do a regular shot here, Stefan. So for this quilt, and I love how graphic this is. There's so many secondary designs going on. But for this quilt, here's my center. I cut 2 light blues the same size, put that on. And now I'm going to take this size block and I'm going to cut 2 red ones out of this size block, cut them in half on the diagonal, and sew them again. So you could just keep going and going and going. You can make a medallion quilt with that idea. So maybe I'm crazy, but I think it's a really, really neat, efficient, easy way to make an economy block without all those weird numbers that the patterns give you. Another tip for you. So let's do a close-up here for this. And you'll notice that these points are pretty good the way these 2 points come together. And I want them to match up right every single time. You could sew this entire seam and then open it up like, oh man, I missed it. They're too far apart, or they're one's on top and one's down below or whatever. So instead of sewing that entire seam consider instead just sewing a 1 inch. And not only that, but baste it, just a 1 inch baste, right? So now we're going to do an overhead, Stephen. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. So here's two leftover blocks. And I just sewed 1 inch from here to here with a basting thread. And then I open it up and I look at it and say, oh, good, I nailed it. I'm good. Let's go ahead and close it and sew with a regular stitch. Or look at it, oh, that's a terrible job. It's easy to take out those 5 or 6 basting stitches and try it again. And I will tell you, after 4 or 5, let's do regular shot, after 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 of these blocks, you're going to get really good at sewing them together and you won't need to baste anymore. Funny story, when I was growing up and my mother was teaching me how to sew and I was supposed to baste everything. I hate basting. When I grow up, I'm never going to baste. And here I am. I'm teaching you how to baste. So crank up your stitch length all the way to 5.0, 5 or 6 stitches across the point, and then open it up and see how you did. Okay, so that's a great tip, not just for the economy block, but anytime that you're trying to match up 2 points from 2 blocks. And if you're just having a really bad time with it, just put sashing between the blocks and then call it a day. So that works too. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to say about the economy block. So we're going to move on unless you have questions, because you know I love me some good questions. And let's turn the page to cover your bits. Stefan's going to remember, well, maybe he didn't remember this, but when my kids were in theater and we would go to state competition in Tampa and the girls would get all dressed up in their cute little outfits. And our teacher, Susan Gerdeman at Lyman, would say, okay, girls, I want dresses that cover your bits. And everybody knew what she said, and that was enough. So this project here, all I have to do is find it. Goodness, I buried it. This project is covering your bits. So what is it? When you go to the dermatologist and or GYN, they're going to give you a paper gown. I hate that paper gown so much. It doesn't make any sense. It just all crinkled up by the time they're done. So instead, I made myself a fabric gown. So this is the piece of fabric that goes on my lap, just a pretty piece of purple knit drapey fabric. I'll talk about it more in a minute. And then the little vest, you could actually go to the next time you go to the doctor, say, can I take this home and use it as a pattern? Or I probably pulled something, I've had this for years and years, pulled something out of my closet that's kind of what I wanted. No darts, no closure, just a very simple vest type situation. 2 seams on the shoulders, 2 seams on the side, done. And in fact, I went to my new dermatologist this week, love her so much. She's like, where did you get that? Because she wanted to give me paper. I'm like, well, I made it. She said, you should sell these to the dermatologist. Like, well, I could, but I've got enough to do. Thank you very much. And of course, a sweet little bag, drawstring bag to carry it in. The one thing I wanted to mention is let's do an overhead. I used a wavy blade for this fabric. If I'd have just done a straight one, it would have raveled a little bit, or I could have serged the edges. I didn't feel like it. I could have hemmed the edges. I didn't feel like it. So we have wavy blades, which is what this is. And then we also have, and I'm just lucky enough to have enough cutters that I can leave my blades on my thing. I don't have to keep switching them out, but you could certainly switch it out. So this is more of a zigzag French fry cut, I guess. Yeah, pinking shear kind of thing. So if you have some place you need to do a pinking shear, that is a good blade. But the wavy blade has a bigger wave. So, and then there's a third one. I forget what it is, but it's really nice to have these sometimes. Oftentimes, if I'm making labels like with cardstock for an event, I will go around the edges with one of my wavy blades just to make it a little bit fancier. So these are nice to have. Again, we're selling the blade, but if you have an old handle that you're not using anymore or a second handle, it's a nice thing to be able to just grab and use it. So these go in here. So keep my fingers safe in my drawer. And there, of course, is my regular blade. So I wanted to show you that. That's in my favorites page if you're so inclined. But, you know, a very simple pattern here that I drew out, but you can just come up with your own. If you're 1.5 yards is probably plenty, unless you're a little bit larger than I am, then you probably want to get 2 yards of fabric. But this is so much nicer, and it, you know, puts into a little bag, and you can carry that along with your handbag in, and it's just so much nicer than that paper gown. So cover your bits. Any questions about that? Thank you, Brenda. It is a neat concept, and I think somebody told me a long time ago that they made their own covers. Like, oh my gosh, that is such a good idea. And the hardest part is remembering to grab that bag when you're on your way out. In fact, this week I was pulling out of the driveway. Oh, forgot my bag, and I had to go back in and get it. But it's worth having. Okay, lots of different ideas here today. Quilt border tips. Often my students love making the center of their quilt, and then when it comes to borders, they get kind of lost. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about borders. Let's do an overhead, honey. Let's say this is, and I'm working small because I want you to be able to see it and not get confused with a huge piece of fabric. So let's say this is a quilt center, right? And I need to put some borders on it. My biggest tip is working with a half a quilt, half a side instead of a whole side. So, you know, if your quilts are as big as the ones behind me, like 72 inches or whatever. And so, you know, you're measuring and you may be off a little bit. But if you fold your quilt in half and just work with a half measurement, life is so much easier. So as you know, or hopefully you know, when you make a quilt, you don't just take a hunk of border fabric and attach it and keep sewing until you're done and you cut it off. No, you do not ever do that. If somebody told you that is okay, they were wrong. And I think most of you probably know that, because invariably it's the wrong amount of fabric and your quilt is going to have wavy borders, and your long armor will say, no, do it again. I'm going to charge you for redoing your borders. So this is how we do it right. We measure in 3 places. So we measure this side. Let's say it's 32 inches. We measure this side. Let's say it's a little less than 32. And we measure this. I'm sorry. I forgot. Half an inch. Let's say that's 32 1/4, a little less than 32. So we add the 3 up and subtract and divide. And we decide the average, let's say, is 32 inches. Let's just pretend that's 32 inches. So we are going to, while we've got it folded in half, because it's a big old quilt and we don't want to have to keep doing it folding in half. So we're going to go ahead and put a pin at the halfway mark right now while we've got it folded in half. And I like to take 2 bites with my pin, because sometimes you're moving the quilt around and the pins fall out. So I like to take 2 bites in this particular case. So I'm leaving that half. And now I'm going to take, let's see, what does it really measure? It measures 1, 2, 3, 4, and a little bit. So now I'm going to take my border fabric, 2, 3, 4, and a little bit, and I'm going to put pins at that halfway mark, and another pin. I'm going to do it all again. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a little bit. And now I've got what I need to border one side of this. And in fact, before I start sewing, I'm going to go ahead and do the other end. Oh, I forgot to say, let's do a straight on shot. I forgot to say that when I decide what my border is going to look like, I sew all my pieces end to end, and I sew them with a 45-degree line. I think you can see that. It's all solid, but there's a 45-degree line, cut off my triangles, open up my seam, and I sew all of my borders together. So then back to the overhead, Steven. So then when I go to put these on, so there's that. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a little bit. And then again, and there, see, I've got a seam there, but that's okay. That's what it's all about. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a little bit. And so now I can put my borders on and my pins will match up. I always try to sew my borders on. Let's do it this way. I like to sew my borders on with my quilt on the top of my sewing machine. That way, if there's any seams along here, oh, and this didn't match up because apparently I didn't measure things right, but these pins are supposed to match up. Anyway, I sew with the quilt on the top so you can see the seams and they don't get twisted. So let's pretend those pins are together. So I'm going to sew to the pin and then sew to the pin. Why don't I cut this off before I start sewing? Do to your best effort, do your very best, and you may still need, oh shoot, I need a little 1/4 of an inch there. I tried really hard to ease everything in and maybe I still needed 1/4 of an inch. Well, if you cut it off exactly, then you're SOL. You've got to piece that thing in. So leave it long until you've sewn it all on to this side and then cut it off, okay? But while I'm at my sewing machine, now I can go to do the other side. I've already got it pinned. I might as well take advantage of that. So it's a little efficiency to not have to keep jumping up and down. So I'm going to do the other side. That one, the pins matched up much better. Sew the other side. Now I can cut it off. Take this to the ironing board and press them. I usually press my borders to the border unless it's a light color. So here it is. I've sewed my 2 side borders. So all of what I just said is in the handout. But I know words and pictures are way better than lots. I should say my words are better than the written words. So I tried to lay it all out there. And then we're going to do pretty much the exact same thing for the top. I'm going to measure here, and measure here. Take the average of those 3 measurements. And I do it again in halvesies. Sorry about that. So 1, 2, 3, 4.5. So I'm going to put a pin here at the halfway mark, and that'll help me later. And then again, put a pin at the halfway mark. So again, my most important point that I'm trying to get across is when I'm putting on borders, I work with half measurements, not whole measurements, and it's so much easier. So then I'm going to measure that, put a pin here, measure it again, put a pin there. That's for my top. So you work to the half and then you work to the end. Work to the half, work to the end. And that's how I put my borders on for every single quilt. Never fail. My borders are always on straight, never have any problems. So hopefully that helps you with the next border of your quilt because it's a great technique. If you missed last month, I went all the way from I've got a quilt top, how do I finish it? Every single step from basting to quilting to binding and everything in between. Some of the steps are optional, but the more steps you do, of course, your better result. So if you missed that, it's on the playlist from the store, our YouTube channel, look at all the playlists. And there's a whole playlist for all my tips, tools, and techniques. So take a look at that if you missed it, because I think it was a really good overall, and there's also a handout that goes with that. So let me know if you have any questions. Again, my email is at the bottom of every free handout. One more thing to show you. Gotta find it. My husband's gonna remember this quilt. I made this when the kids were little, and this was an I Spy quilt. I'm not here to talk about the front, but since it's here, I'm gonna I always thought this was a good idea. I used to belong to a group of quilters that always met every Friday. They were all making quilts for their grandkids. I was making quilts for my kids. And we had a bunch of novelty prints. So we would pass a bag around. We had all our novelty prints. And every time somebody got the bag, we would cut up little hexagons or squares or whatever somebody was doing, and then throw in another 10 or 15 novelty prints. So that bag just kept traveling around with new prints all the time. So this is what I ended up with. Most of these fabrics were not mine, but I was able to share the wealth with everybody else. And then once I made this, let's do a close-up of this. I used, I hand big stitched some words so they were able to use their, learn how to read and then find the carrot or find the shell or find the pumpkin there's the pumpkin in the quilt. So it was a fun thing, many fun hours sitting on the ground with the quilt, looking for different things. But what I really wanted to show you, and we'll just stay right there, is this pocket. It's kind of hard to see because I had a different, there's a pocket back here. And anytime that I know that a quilt is going to be used on a couch, I will make a foot pocket. There we go. And most of my feet pocket, and this one's a little small, I think. I finally decided 18-inch square is a good number. And also, this is a bad one to bring now that I look at it because it wasn't bound. Lately, what I do with my, there you go. Lately, what I do with my quilt pockets is I make a smaller quilt, basically. It's an 18-inch square quilt. It has backing, it has batting, it has front. And I bind the sides and the top, and then I pin it to the back so the quilt binding takes care of the bottom section. The only thing about putting a quilt pocket in is that you pretty much have to hand sew the edges. Otherwise, your stitches are going to show on the front. And here again, I machine sewed this down so you can kind of see the stitching that I used to put it down, but that was a long time ago. Let's see, probably 27, 28 years ago when I made this quilt. Oh, there's a label. Is there a label? Yes. When did I make this? 1998. So it's been a while. So my techniques have improved. So I machine sewed that down, but I would probably recommend hand sewing the pocket to the back of the quilt. But again, anytime you have a quilt that you know is going to be used on a couch, this is so nice to either keep your toesies warm in the winter, or it keeps the quilt on your feet when you're on the lazyboy and the quilt doesn't fall off. So that's everything. That's everything I wanted to tell you. And man, I got everything done in an hour. So you can go on about your day now. Thank you for participating and thank you for being a part of this. And reminds me of the quilt. Oh, thank you for saying that, Brenda. The whole idea, as I say in the handout, is it started, I thought it was going to be a quillo. But then because I used cotton batting, when I folded it up, it wouldn't fit into the pocket. So we don't use it as a pocket. But a quillo is a quilt made into a pillow. So if you use fluffy polyester batting, it will squish down enough to make into that pillow. And people make the quillos for, I think your mom had somebody at the hospital making them for the kids, and they've taken them with them, but they were fleece. And it was basically a single layer of fleece with a pocket in the back, and then you could fold up the fleece and put it in the pocket, and then it was a stadium pillow. So it's the same idea, except we don't make pillows with that because it's cotton batting. So hopefully that made sense. Lakeland, thank you for showing up. And I think that's everything. It was a good I Spy quilt. That was from a book. I can't even remember the name. It was a book with a bunch of different kid quilts. It was just hexagons, and I'm not sure if I would do it again because it was all hand sewn hexagons, but you can easily do I Spies with squares or triangles or anything else. So thank you for joining me. Thank you so much. And we won't be here in December, so I will have a ton of content for you. Come back in January, 4th Saturday of January. So look forward to seeing you then. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.